A ceasefire deal to end the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah is holding, hours after coming into effect. Now, this after residents of Beirut endured the most intense day of Israeli attacks since the war began. Local authorities say more than 40 people were killed by Israeli strikes across Lebanon yesterday. If the truce holds, it will end more than a year of violence.
A moment to celebrate. Residents of South Lebanon displaced by the war ignored warnings to stay away until the Israeli military had fully retreated. They were desperate to return to their homes. The artillery, missiles, and guns, for now, have stopped.
We were feeling scared, more than you can imagine. Thank God. What happened, happened.
They announced the ceasefire at 4. At 4:10, I was on the road toward my home in Marrakech. It's an indescribable feeling.
God's had mercy on me, and I hope we have learned lessons from this life and this war.
Supporters of Hezbollah handed out and waved flags of the militants. Despite the heavy losses and the deaths of so many top Hezbollah commanders, they vow not to give up.
God willing, we are victorious always. We are going to be a fork in the eye of the enemy.
Such talk in southern Lebanon makes displaced residents of northern Israel, also returning to their homes, less than confident about the ceasefire.
What I do know is that the fight will be renewed sometime. It doesn't matter whether it's in 2 months or 2 years or 5.
Indeed, the Israeli military says it will remain primed to strike again should Hezbollah violate the ceasefire deal. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reminded Israelis that while hostilities in Lebanon had stopped, the war in Gaza continues.
We are changing the face of the Middle East. With God's help, we will establish security, we will rehabilitate the north, and we will continue united until victory.
Victory, the Israeli government has said repeatedly, is tied to the destruction of Hamas. And while the ceasefire is good news for Lebanon, the question of how to end the war in Gaza remains.
Straight to our correspondent, Stella Männer in Beirut. Welcome, Stella. What is it like there on day one of this 60-day ceasefire?
I'm standing here in the southern suburb of Beirut, a Hezbollah stronghold that has been heavily hit over the last couple of months. People here are very happy and celebrating. Members of Hezbollah are giving out Hezbollah flags, and people are running around with these flags. Maybe you've just heard it in the background. That was celebratory gunfire. People are really celebrating the fact that the ceasefire is here. But you can also see clearly the massive destruction that is left here in Beirut. Israel really stepped up its attacks on to Beirut and the whole country in the hours before the ceasefire agreement. And you can also see it, hopefully behind me. There is a building that is completely collapsed. And this destruction is what we see here and what I see here at the moment in many, many streets.
And what are Lebanon's political figures saying about this deal?
The Lebanese government said that it will commit to the ceasefire deal that has been made. And Prime Minister Najib Mikati has also called on Israel to do the same and also stick to the agreement. He also thanked the Lebanese population for being so courageous and for going through this hard time. Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri thanked the international community and everyone who made this agreement possible. And he said that this moment is really a test for Lebanon and the country to see whether they can save Lebanon and rebuild Lebanon. And he said it's very important that the government is now electing a president.
Right. And part of this test will be the Lebanese army trying to enforce this ceasefire with international partners. What sort of challenges is this poor country's army going to face?
There are several challenges that the Lebanese army will face. First of all, we know that Israel has heavily bombarded the south of Lebanon. They blew up entire villages, and also infrastructures like main streets are heavily destroyed. So the infrastructure could cause some problems to just regain control over the territory. Another more important factor is that the Lebanese army doesn't have a lot of money as the state is bankrupt. So the army needs to send more soldiers down to the south. And the question is, if they have enough, if they need to recruit more soldiers, and if they are able to do this in very soon and not too far and not too long from now.
Thank you, Stella. DW correspondent Stella Männer in Beirut. Let's get more on this from Hans-Jakob Schindler. He's a senior director at the non-governmental organisation Counter-Extremism Project. He joins us from Berlin. Welcome back to DW. So, no formal comment on this ceasefire from Hezbollah yet, but their backers in Iran have welcomed the deal. Do you see that as a positive sign that the agreement might actually hold?
Absolutely. Hezbollah, especially now in its weakened form, is more dependent on Iran than it was a year ago. And hence, if the guys who are paying for the show telling you that this is the decision, it is very clear that Hezbollah is going to keep to the agreement.
You talk about Hezbollah being weakened there. Israel, of course, having killed many of its leaders and severely compromised its organisation. How strong is Hezbollah now after months of fighting?
Well, I mean, Hezbollah has several parts. So the military terrorist part is certainly weakened. The command and control structure is very severely disrupted. The tunnel network is disrupted. Many of the rocket and drone launch sites has been destroyed. And of course, you have the top commanders all dead. However, Hezbollah is also a political and social organization. And already in the reports that you just showed, you can see that this social support base has not been weakened. So the sad news is, of course, this is a political window of opportunity to hopefully also weaken Hezbollah politically in Lebanon and then get a president elected for the country, which Hezbollah has blocked over the last couple of years, 13 times. However, it's not clear whether that's possible at this point.
Understood. So was Hezbollah effectively bounced into this? They're in a very weak position. They had few other options.
Militarily, they had no longer any really options. You cannot fight a very organized, very modern army like the Israeli army with a hardly functioning command communication structure and no real military leadership. Nasrallah was actually organizing all of these military activities. Naim was always the one who was responsible for politics and social support of Hezbollah. He has no experience in doing this. So they were, militarily speaking, with the back to the wall. However, that doesn't mean much for their political influence within Lebanon.
Right. Part of this deal requires the Lebanese army to keep Hezbollah from building up again at the border with Israel, along with international support. How capable are they of fulfilling their part of this deal?
Well, it's very clear that they cannot do this alone. The Lebanese army is a glorified police force, really weakened because Hezbollah did not want to have a viable second power center in a military sense in Lebanon. So they definitely need international support. What's in the ceasefire is actually what's already been decided in resolution, the resolution that ended the war in 2006. So it's really high time that this gets implemented. But even then, it was always the Lebanese government who had to start the process. Now, this has now started. It had to make a request, which it hadn't done until this ceasefire agreement, to start the process of cleaning southern Lebanon from Hezbollah military installations. And we have to see how much the international support holds. If there is not sufficient support, the Lebanese army is not going to be really being able to withstand a even weakened Hezbollah military structure because of the enormous political influence and stranglehold that Hezbollah holds over all parts of Lebanon at this point.
This is a 60-day deal. What's the plan for day 61?
Well, obviously, no one was able to conduct a peace deal in the real sense of the word in this point. The hope, of course, is that then the ceasefire will be extended after 60 days. This is really a trial period to see whether Hezbollah is now really withdrawing from southern Lebanon beyond the Litani River, as it was demanded in the resolution already in 2006, whether this can be guaranteed, whether this can be checked. If this is not the case, the Israeli army will have to resume military operations. But of course, the hope is, since Iran is on board, since very likely the Hezbollah leadership is on board, and for the first time the Lebanese government seems to be on board to do this, that it can be extended on day 61 and then hopefully for a very long time. But Hezbollah is unfortunately only temporarily weakened, a couple of years maybe, to rebuild everything, and then Israel may find itself in a very similar situation again.
Thank you for talking us through that so clearly. Hans-Jakob Schindler from the Counter-Extremism Project. Thank you.
Thank you.